word meaning. Brahma, spiritual in nature.
Brahma, spiritual in nature.
Arpana, contribution.
Arpanam, contribution.
Brahma, the supreme.
Brahma, the supreme.
Havihi, butter.
Havihi, butter.
Brahma, spiritual.
Brahma, spiritual.
Agno, in the fire of consummation.
In the fire of consummation.
Brahmana, by the spirit soul.
Brahmana, the spirit soul.
Bhutam, offered.
Uttam, offered.
Brahma, spiritual kingdom.
Brahma, spiritual kingdom.
Eva, certainly.
Eva, certainly.
Tena, by him.
Dana, by him.
Gantavyam, to be reached.
Gantavyam, to be reached.
Brahma, spiritual.
Brahma, spiritual.
Karma, in activities.
Karma, in activities.
Samadhina, by complete absorption.
Samadhina, by complete absorption.
The translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Purport. How activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness and all of them will be described in the following verses. But for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. A conditioned soul entangled in material contamination is sure to act in the material atmosphere and yet has to get out of such an atmosphere. The process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely curds. The materially absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness as set forth here in the Gita. This process is generally known as yajna or activities, sacrifices simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. The more the activities of material world are performed in Krishna consciousness or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. The word Brahman, means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual and the rays of His transcendental body are called Brahma Jyoti, His spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahma Jyoti. But when the Jyoti covered by illusion or Maya or sense gratification, it is called material. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor and the result, all combined together, Brahman or the absolute truth. The absolute truth covered by Maya is called matter. Matter dovetailed for the cause of the absolute truth regains its spiritual quality. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi or trance. Anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called yajna or sacrifice for the absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or leader of the performer, and the result or ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the absolute, the Supreme Brahman. That is the method of Krishna consciousness. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Dasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manavishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupagadamyam Tadati Swamratiham Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Udapadakalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagijatam Saganaragnadan Vidam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Saganadalita Shri Vishakhan Vidamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurani Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Krishna Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyaiva Chapati Nanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Namhe Degiryat Kripa Namam Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishna Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashati Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Shri Vasadi Gauravanta Vinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare So I'm sure some of you might have heard this verse before, some of you may not have heard this word before, but there's one word in here which is very commonly repeated, which is Brahma. Now, what is this Brahma? Does this refer to a Brahmana? Does this refer to Lord Brahma? Or what does this Brahma actually refer to? So, Brahma actually refers to the supreme truth, supreme absolute truth. So, in the Vedic scriptures, there are three types of so-called Brahma. One of them is Lord Brahma, who is essentially the four-headed demigod, who is responsible for creating this whole material universe. The other one is known as a Brahman. Brahman is a person who is in the Varnashrama caste and who is considered to be doing priestly activities, teaching, etc. That is a Brahmana. But this one here, this is the third one. This is called Brahm. So actually, there's four types of Brahman, you could say. One type of Brahm means becoming illusion, like when you become confused by something, then also it said you're in Brahmit ho gaya. Exactly. So one of that is that. One of the meanings of Brahm is that. But over here, the meaning of Brahman, it's actually a very common word that is used in the Upanishads and in the Puranas also. Hathato Brahma Jigyasa. It starts, Vedanta Sutra starts with that. Now, this Brahma actually refers to the absolute truth. Absolute truth is different from our common understanding of God. How is absolute truth different from God? You see, the reason why Srila Prabhupada, when he translated the Bhagavad Gita, what does he say? How does he refer to Krishna? Does anyone know how he refers to Krishna as? What does he say?
Supreme Personality of God.
Supreme Personality of Godhead, exactly. So why does Srila Prabhupada say Supreme Personality of Godhead rather than just saying God or Sri Krishna? Just one word would be so easy. Actually, the whole idea is that Krishna is not just God. Krishna is the supreme absolute truth. And that is a very important point to understand. Like for example, if you go to the Christian tradition or if you go to the Muslim traditions, they have an understanding, vague understanding of God. They present God as being like a judge. They present God as being the creator of this universe. And then they also present God as being the ultimate, like the one who actually destroys this universe also. So they only limit God to being someone who, when we were young, we had this teacher in class who used to say, what is God? God is G, O and D. G means generator, O means operator, and D means destroyer. They said that this is God. Actually, that is probably the definition of God. Maybe that's fine. But the conception of Krishna or the conception of the supreme truth is actually much beyond that. So how do we understand that? So the way we understand this is when we understand that the supreme personality of Godhead. What is the meaning of this word? The supreme personality of Godhead. So actually, if you want to understand what is Godhead, so the way to understand what is the supreme personality of Godhead, we have to understand what is Godhead first. So now this Godhead word might be a very new term for most of you. You probably haven't thought about what Godhead actually means. Or you might have heard it, but you don't know what it means. So what Godhead actually means is Vadanti tat tattva vedas tattvam yad jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagwaneti shabdyati. Which means that the absolute truth or the absolute Godhead contains three different aspects, three different characteristics which make him Godhead. Now what are those three different characteristics? First one is Brahman, which is what we're discussing here today. So Brahman is the effulgence of the Lord. It is the substratum from which this whole material universe is created. So like if you go into science, and in science they have this concept that everything came from the Big Bang. Now the question may be asked, what came from the Big Bang? So they'll say everything came from Big Bang. But what was there before everything? They will say nothing was there. So now the question is, how can something come from nothing? So that they do not answer. So you know what they did? There was one guy called Stephen Hawking, and he was the one who came up with this idea that there was a Big Bang, that everything came from nothing. But actually he realized that if he says that everything came from a huge explosion and that there was nothing and that nothing exploded into itself and then it somehow created everything into order, he realized that that actually might prove the existence of God. Because how can something come from nothing? So then he changed his stance and he said that no, actually there was no such thing as a Big Bang. There was this thing called the multiverse. So he said that the universe always existed in some form or the other. It goes through a big crunch and then a big bang. So he says what happens is that the universe, essentially, the previous universe, it goes through a crunch, becomes very, very small, and then it comes to this point of a singularity, and then it expands all the way up again. So this is what they said, because they don't want to acknowledge the presence of God. So then when you ask him, okay, when did this previous universe start? He will say, well, there was no start to it. Yeah. So I mean, that's a bit hard to believe, because we know from examining this material world that things do have a beginning and things do have an end. Things do have an end. Srila, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes Natve Vaham Jatu Nasham Natvam Neme Janadipam. He says that the soul is something which does not have birth, neither does it have death. But the material body has birth and it has death. So all things that are material, they are born and they are destroyed. So that is a very common phenomenon that we observe. So how is it possible that when all material things have a birth and death, that the universe, which is itself material, does not have a birth and death? So actually that whole concept, even if you look at it from a very simplistic philosophical way, it doesn't make any sense. So essentially this is the whole idea. The whole idea is that the Supreme Absolute Truth not only generates or operates and destroys, but actually he permeates the whole universe also. So when you look at Brahman, which is the first energy that we were talking about, so Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaneti, Satyati. We'll come to the other two later. But Brahman, what is Brahman? Brahman is the substance from which this whole universe came. So if you look at the Vedic conception of creation, it's actually quite different to the Western conception of creation. And it's quite different to the biblical concept of creation also. Like in the Bible, they talk about the fact that there was, first there was the Word of God, and then there was light, and then there was the whole universe, then there was heavens, etc. And God completed creation in 7 days, according to the Bible. They have a 2-page chapter on Genesis, which is, Genesis means how the universe was created. But if you read Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a whole canto, 5th canto, which explains how the universe was created. And it's actually very, very technical. So it's explained that, like the whole universe, what does it come from? Where does it come from? The whole universe actually comes from this Brahman effulgence. So the effulgence of Lord Krishna, it comes from all of that. So that effulgence of the Lord, it transforms into this thing called Mahatattva. It transforms into this thing called Pradhana. Now, Pradhana is essentially a reflection of the Brahman energy, but it's actually material. So it's actually the closest thing we have to spiritual energy, but it's actually all material, and it's the closest thing we have to what is known as the singularity in the Western conception of creation. So then that becomes differentiated. That becomes into Mahatattva, and then Mahatattva becomes into the false ego. Then from false ego come all the other things. Like false ego comes the intelligence, then comes the mind, then come all the 5 different elements, the senses, etc. All of that comes into existence. So that's the process of creation that's explained in the Bhagavad Gita. So the Brahman is essentially the undifferentiated effulgence of Krishna. Now, many people, especially who study the Vedanta, they think that this effulgence is what we have to attain. They talk about this concept, I'm sure many of you would have heard, Nirakar Brahman. We want to obtain Nirakar Krishna, formless Krishna. Why? Because the effulgence of Krishna is actually formless. So they say that this is the ultimate truth. So the ultimate truth is formless. But actually that's not true. Because if you look at light, like for example, you can see light coming on the deities here. Where is that light coming from? It's coming from a source. It's coming from something which has a form, right? It's coming from a light bulb, as you all pointed out. It's coming from a light bulb. That light bulb has a form. So actually, any kind of light, it can't exist without a source. So the light which is coming from Krishna actually has a source, and that light is Krishna. So that's why those who say that the absolute truth is just like light, they're actually very, very bewildered. They don't know, they don't understand God completely. So then you have after the Brahman aspect. So we understood that from Brahma is actually the aspect of Krishna which is used to create this whole universe. But then Krishna found that actually there's a problem. Even though you create the universe, it doesn't mean that that will sustain it. Like for example, a watchmaker can make a watch, but that doesn't mean that the watch will run automatically. he needs to put a battery inside the watch. Otherwise the watch will also not run. So then Krishna has to personally enter into each of the atoms of this material universe to sustain them. And the way he does this is actually quite interesting. You know what form the Lord takes when he enters into each atom? He enters as Shirodakshai Vishnu, yes, that's right. But the way he manifests to us, the way he appears to us, we can actually see Krishna, even now, actually, but we don't realize that we're seeing Krishna. The way he enters into each atom is through time. So when you see time passing, you see, oh, it's already 7, quarter to 8, etc. already time to have prasadam, why is Aarti not happening, etc. Like when you're seeing the time, actually you can realize that that time is actually Krishna. Because if Krishna was not there in this material world, if he did not enter into each atom, no atom would move. The presence of Krishna within each atom gives the atom its essential nature. It's explained in the Upanishads that when Krishna enters into water, he gives water its taste. When Krishna enters into fire, he gives fire the heat. When Krishna enters the earth, he gives earth the smell. When Krishna enters the ether, he gives the ether the sound. So actually without Krishna, none of these elements, none of these water, air, ether, fire, actually every time you're drinking water, Srila Prabhupada says you can remember Krishna. Why? Because water is getting its taste from Krishna, fire gets its heat from Krishna. So all of this is actually being given by Krishna. So to maintain it also Krishna needs to enter into this material universe. And that form of the Lord, as Prabhu pointed out, is none other than Paramatma. So Paramatma enters into each living being also. Actually, he enters into us also. If Krishna did not enter, so one thing to understand very clearly is that the Jivatma or our soul is separate to Krishna. Our Jivatma is not Krishna. But Krishna can enter into our soul also. So Krishna is even smaller than our soul. He can enter into our soul. And because of his presence inside our soul, we are able to desire things. We are able to enjoy things. We are able to move around, do all these things. It's only because of Krishna's presence even inside our soul. So it's not that Krishna is just present inside our body. Krishna is also even present inside our soul. That's why it said Sahasra Sirasha Purusha Sahasraksha Sahasrapa. That means the Supreme Personality of Godhead is there everywhere. He is there everywhere. He's seeing everything. He's always going with you. In fact, even places where you have not been, he has been there before. He can predict what you're going to choose. So many people have this conception also that, like if, especially in the Western world, they have this conception that if God is, if we have free will, how many of you have heard of free will? You all know free will, right? Yeah, so many of people say that if we have free will, then how can God know what we're going to choose? Because free will is meant to be random. But actually we understand that Krishna is already there inside our soul. So he already knows what we're going to choose. It's not that he forces you to choose something, but he's already there as a Paramatma in the soul, so he knows what you're going to choose. So like this, by every action you're performing, you can become Krishna conscious. Because every time you choose something, you can remember that, oh yes, Krishna is Gatir Bharta Prabhu Sakshi. Krishna is always witnessing all of our actions. Whatever we're doing, Krishna is witnessing. He is explained to be like a bird. So like it's explained in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad that there's a tree. And on that tree there are two birds. One bird is jumping around, tasting all the fruits on that tree. Whereas another bird is just quietly sitting and watching that other bird. What is that other bird thinking? The second bird is thinking, oh my God, this first bird is such a fool that he's running around here and there, but he's not turning towards me. He's trying to enjoy different fruits to be happy, but he's not turning towards me. If he turns towards me, this other bird will be happy. So this is what the Paramatma is doing, sitting in our hearts. He is waiting for us to turn towards him. So that when we turn towards him, we will be eternally happy, we will eternally be satisfied. So that is what is Paramatma. Then on top of that also there is Bhagwan. What is Bhagwan? Bhagwan is the two-handed form. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadi Radhir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Which means that Krishna is eternally present in the Goloka planet. So it's not just that Krishna is the localized aspect in everyone, like the Paramatma in everyone's heart, or he's just the Brahman effulgence. Actually, Krishna is a person. Now, this understanding is very, very difficult for most people to grasp and for most people to comprehend that the absolute truth is actually a person. That the absolute truth sits in Goloka Vrindavan, all the way up there. from whom this effulgence comes, from whose effulgence the spiritual world is created, from whose effulgence the material world is created, from whose willing itself, just by his willing, the whole cosmic manifestation runs essentially. So just by his willing, just by his thinking, he's able to run this whole cosmic manifestation. That person is none other than Krishna. So that is known as the Bhagavan aspect. So when you look at all of these three together, so when you look at the Brahman aspect, the Paramatma aspect and the Bhagavan aspect, all three together, that is known as Godhead. So now next time anyone asks you, why does Srila Prabhupada say what is this Godhead? You can explain that Godhead means it contains, that the Supreme Absolute Truth contains three aspects, which is Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. Now what is this difference between Supreme Personality of Godhead? So why is Krishna often referred to as Supreme Personality of Godhead? The reason why Krishna is referred to as Supreme Personality of Godhead is because when Krishna appeared in this material world in front of us, which aspect appeared of Krishna? Was it the Paramatma? Was it the Brahman? Or was it the Bhagavan aspect? Bhagavan aspect appeared in front of us. And that Bhagavan aspect is the personality aspect of the Supreme Absolute Truth. Because Brahman doesn't have personality. Paramatma has personality, but it's covered because Paramatma doesn't really do anything. He doesn't interact with the soul. He just gives his darshan to the soul. Like you would have seen many pictures of yogis, like yogis are sitting in meditation like that, and then all they're seeing is they're seeing the beautiful form of the Lord. And they're seeing the form of the Lord and the Lord is seeing them. That's it. There's literally nothing else. So that's all they can do with Paramatma. You can't do anything else. Like the Gopas in Vrindavan, they are playing with Krishna. They are feeding Krishna with their left hand. They are eating first and then they're feeding to Krishna. You can't do any of that with Paramatma. Paramatma is just, you observe, I will observe. Just that kind of relationship. Yeah. So that is why the Supreme, that's why when Krishna appeared, he was the personality aspect which appeared. Now Krishna has many personalities also. Now you might be surprised. Oh, Krishna has split personality disorder. Oh, I watched this movie called Split. In Split, that person had 24 personalities. So how many personalities Krishna has? Actually, Krishna has unlimited personalities. Yeah, Hari, as someone said, Hari Ananta, Hari Katha Ananta, which means that the Lord himself is unlimited. He has unlimited personalities. Can you give me some examples of his personalities? What other personalities does he have?
It's the most beautiful,
like his
most powerful.
All the incarnations. So all of these are actually different personalities of Krishna. So you can't be, generally people have this conception that Krishna, when he appears as Ram, he is different. Ram is a different person, Krishna is a different person. No, actually they're originally all from the same personality, but he expresses that personality in different ways. So actually he expresses, you could say, he expresses multiple personalities at the same time. Like in Krishna, he is, what does he express? He expresses his Leela Madhuri. So he expresses his sweet pastimes. That's why he's known as Leela Purushottama. Whereas when he comes as Lord Ram, he expresses his Maryada. So he becomes Maryada Purushottama. Whereas when he comes in the form of Narsimhadev, yeah, he expresses his Ugra Rupa. Ugra Purushottama, you could say. Like his anger personified. Yeah, as Lord Narsimha. So in different, and you could say in Vaman Avatar, he comes as Chala Purushottama. He is the master of all cheaters. He cheated Bali Maharaj as well. So yeah, in each personality, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in each, you could say, incarnation, he expresses a different personality. But when he appears as Krishna, that is the Supreme Personality. Because from him, all other personalities come. So it's not that there's a difference between all personalities, but the way Srila Prabhupada explains it is, he says that, you take one candle, and this candle lights many other candles which look exactly the same. Now when you put all the candles down, you won't know which one came first, which one came second. Yet, there is still a very small difference between the first candle and all of the other candles. Because one candle is the source of all the others. So that is why?
Prabhu, it's actually, Tattvata they are all same, but
yes,
rasa-wise, they are different.
Rasa-wise they are different, yes. And they just manifest different number of qualities.
Yes.
Yeah, like for example, Krishna, it said that he has infinite qualities, but he manifests 64 predominant qualities. Whereas Lord Ram, he manifests 62 and a half qualities. Lord Vishnu, he manifests 60 qualities, and all the other avatars of Lord Vishnu, they manifest 60 qualities. So if we see it like that, all of these personalities, they are actually, or the original one of them is Krishna. So now when someone asks you what is the meaning of this supreme personality of Godhead, this supreme personality of Godhead is nothing but the Bhagwan aspect from the absolute truth, or from the absolute Godhead. So that is the way to understand what is this supreme personality of Godhead. As you know, we kind of digressed from the verse, but the verse essentially says Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagna, Brahmanahutta. So the way I explained this is, actually I've kind of explained this already. So what this verse is saying is, we have to understand that whatever is there in this material universe, whatever is there here, it actually all comes from Krishna. It obtains its essential nature from Krishna. So this wood obtains its woodness from Krishna. The paper obtains its paperness from Krishna. So everything ultimately we get from Krishna. So that means this is known as the Brahmanahutam. Brahmanahutam means, so essentially what this verse is explaining is that if you want to perfect your life, what is the way of perfecting your life? The way of perfecting your life is firstly to understand that every single thing which is present in this material universe emanates from Krishna. So now the thing is, what should we do with that? So okay, everything is Krishna, well, okay, fine, I will enjoy with Krishna, I will take this, so in this ice cream there is Krishna, okay fine, I will eat this ice cream, I will enjoy with Krishna. No, if you do that, then there will be very severe consequences. So the whole idea is that everything that is there, so everything which is there, which Krishna has provided, should actually be offered to Krishna himself. So the example is given, like for example, I don't know how many of you have been, most of you would have been to Ganga also, right? You've been to Ganga. So when you go to Ganga, what do? You go to take bath, and when you take bath, you take water from the Ganga, and then you offer it to the Ganga itself. So similarly, whenever we act in this material world, whatever we do, we have to take all of the ingredients and ultimately offer them to Krishna itself. This concept is known as Yukta Vairagya. Yukta Vairagya means we don't take anything for our own personal self-interest, but whatever we can use in Krishna's service, use in Krishna's service. If you have a car, use it in Krishna's service. Maybe drive the devotees around, drive around his paraphernalia, help the devotees carry stuff here and there in your car. So you can use your car in Krishna's service. If you have a house, best use, make your house a temple. Worship Krishna in that house and invite devotees, serve the sannyasis, serve the devotees in your house. Make that house a temple. So house can be used in Krishna's service. Money you can use in Krishna's service. Last week we were discussing about charity. And you can use money also in Krishna's service in many different ways. You can use to distribute books, you can use to propagate Krishna consciousness. All of these things are there. So you can use it to serve Krishna himself. So this is known as Brahmanahutam, which means the offering is made into Brahman, or the offering is ultimately made into Krishna. So what will happen by this? By this we will attain spiritual realization. Brahmeva tena gantavyam Brahma karma samadhina. If you do this constantly, if you keep performing the activities like this, so you keep in mind that everything ultimately is the absolute truth, I have to take and offer this to the absolute truth. If you steady your mind in this, that everything I have, everything I possess should be used in Krishna's service, that is known as samadhina. Brahma karma samadhina. So samadhi, essentially this verse is saying, samadhi is only possible when we engage in the direct service of Krishna by offering everything we have in the service of Krishna. If we don't offer everything in the service of Krishna, then actually what will we do? If we don't offer things in the service of Krishna, then we will use it for our own self-gratification. It's not possible to remain indifferent in this material world. Things are shoved down on our throat. Have you heard that phrase? It's said that, things are being shoved down my throat. Like advertisements. Like for example, when you go down, driving on the street, you'll see some billboard. Yeah? Even if you don't want McDonald's, you will see 5 billboards on your way to work, then you might want McDonald's. Why? Because that advertising is being shoved down into your throat. Even though you may not initially want it, but it's being shoved down into your throat. So that is what this material nature will do. Material nature will shove down things into your consciousness. Now it's up to you how you use them. You can either take that and you can enjoy it for yourself, or you can take that and use it in Krishna's service. So that verse is very famous. is if you go to Vedanta colleges in India, or if you go to Gurukuls, Vedic Gurukuls in India, they recite this verse before having prasadam. They recite this verse. So like we recite Sharira Vidyajal Jogindriya Taikal. They recite this verse. Brahmarpanam Brahma Vig Brahma Gram Brahmanautam Brahmaiva Tera Gantapyam Brahma Karma Samadhana. To remember that everything we are getting is ultimately from Krishna, including prasadam. When you get prasadam, it's not that it's just some food that's meant for my enjoyment. Actually, that prasadam is meant for the service of Krishna. So you honor that prasadam and then you pray to that prasadam. Oh prasadam, please engage me in Krishna's service. Whatever energy you're giving me, please use that energy in Krishna's service. So we actually pray to prasadam also. It's not that we enjoy prasadam. Oh, today I got 5 prasadam. Yay. Enjoy nicely. No, actually that whatever prasadam you have should also be used in Krishna's service. If you do this, advancement in Krishna consciousness will become very, very quick. You will very quickly advance in Krishna consciousness. Ultimately, the whole game in Krishna consciousness is here. Srila Prabhupada said that you don't need the whole world to practice Krishna consciousness. You don't even need your house to practice Krishna consciousness. All you need to practice Krishna consciousness is this space. Yeah, your mind space.
Your consciousness.
Your consciousness is all you need. Your consciousness, if you fix that consciousness properly, if you use that in the service of Krishna, then you will advance like this. Srila Prabhupada said you can advance in Krishna consciousness in 1 second, he said. Yeah, if you change your conception that all of these things are not meant for my enjoyment, but they are meant for the enjoyment of Krishna. As soon as you do that, you will see huge, humongous changes in your life itself. Yeah, you will become eternally peaceful. What is that verse in 5th chapter? Does anyone know which talks about this? 5th chapter, last verse. I'm having mind blank, that's why I asked. I thought someone will remember. It's just, if I just see the first word, I'll Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suhridam Sarva Bhutaram Gyatva Mam Shantim Rachati. Which means that once Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam, if you offer all your sacrifices, all your austerities, everything onto me, then I will make you very peaceful. You will become very peaceful. Essentially, that's what the verse says. Gyatva Mam Shantim Rachati. You will become very peaceful. Which is something that we are all looking for in this material world, because that's something that lacks here. So if we can become peaceful ourselves, then that is the perfection of life. So having said that, I will finish there. If anyone has any comments, any questions, anything they'd like to share or any criticisms.
Yeah, the Paramahamsa, the Supreme Personality of God, the Paramahamsa is the...
Paramatma, yeah.
Paramatma, what is that again?
So Paramatma is where Krishna himself enters into each atom to sustain it.
Yeah.
So he
Vishnu,
enters,
basically Vishnu.
yeah, in the form of Shirodakshaya.
Shiro.
Yeah, or Kala. Yeah, Kala is also there. Kala means time. So he enters into each atom in the form of time and he makes the electrons move. He makes the protons. Protons don't move, do they? No, actually now they say that protons and neutrons also move. Because they can also become waves. That's what they're saying now. So, yeah, he makes those things move also, pretty much. Yeah.
Paramatma means supreme soul. The
Param Atma, yeah, so it means supreme soul of everything, including the Jiva. Yeah, so he exists inside everything. That's right. Yeah.
There is related to what he said, Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan. There's a Paribhasa Sutra of Srimad Bhagavatam, which refers why Krishna is Supreme Personality of God as well. Eti Chamsa Kala Pumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Soya.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that verse explains that there's one verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 3, verse number 28. Yeah, that verse explains that Krishna is the Supreme. So there are multiple different incarnations of the Lord, but Krishna is the Supreme Personality. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Ete cha amsa kala pumsa, which means that all of these other expansions which are explained, like Vishnu, Rama, Balram, etc., these are all expansions, but Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Bhagavan. Lord Krishna is Bhagavan himself. So that is the important thing to understand. Yes, nice. Okay. So having said that, we will finish there. Vancha kalpa tarubhyasya kripa sindhubhya vacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So if you don't have Bhagavad Gita, please take Bhagavad Gita and read Bhagavad Gita and make your life perfect. We discuss Bhagavad Gita here every Wednesday, but actually Bhagavad Gita should be read every day. So please take Bhagavad Gita if you don't have. Right?
Hare Krishna.
So we'll have Aarti now, so if everyone can stand up.
Relevant.
See you.